Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for the Atlanta City Council District 1 Candidate Forum. My name is Ashley Bruner. I serve as policy advocate at the ACLU of Georgia. We at the ACLU of Georgia and our partners, the League of Women Voters, Atlanta Fulton County, as well as the Georgia Association of Black Women Attorneys, encourages informed and active participation in government through education and advocacy. And we are so excited that you've joined us this evening for this conversation moderated by the one and only Sally Sears. Sally Sears is an award-winning news reporter, a founding board member of the South Fork Conservancy. The Trust for Public Land named Sally its 2015 Trailblazer for her leadership of the vision of the South Fork. Her work is an outgrowth of 35 years of news reporting in growing cities across the South. Sally covered politics and suburban growth for WAGA and WSB-TV since 1984. Current television reports include specialized news reporting on CBS 46. She served as the founding chair of the DeKalb County Watershed Oversight Committee. Sally is a native of Montevallo, Alabama, and a magna cum laude graduate of Princeton University. Thank you so much, Sally, for joining us.
Thank you for that warm introduction, and I am looking forward to hearing what's ahead in the future, having seen Atlanta grow in the years that I've been here, and I'm happy to introduce a fine crop of candidates for District 1. Let's make sure everybody knows where District 1 is. This is the part of Atlanta that includes Summer Hill and Grant Park, Chosewood and Peoplestown, and several other neighborhoods fine and prominent on the southeastern side of the city. And I look forward to hearing from each of the 6 candidates who'd like to take the place of incumbent Carla Smith, who has served with honor and a while at City Council. Let's start with a few words from each of the candidates telling us who you are, what part of the district you live in, and a little bit about why you want to do this job. Clarence Blaylock, why don't you kick us off?
Thank you, Sally, and thank you for hosting. My name is Clarence Blaylock. I was born at Piedmont Hospital right here in Atlanta, Georgia. I have 10 years experience in city government, including being the Deputy Director of Planning at the City of Forest Park, where I manage code enforcement, so I have extensive experience dealing with the public. I have a master's in environmental science. Legislatively, I want to focus on an environmental agenda, including finally passing the strongest version of our tree ordinance, taking care of our violation of our consent decree on our streams, and dealing with issues like lead contamination on the west side. And I believe with my extensive background in city government, I'll be ready on day one. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Blaylock. Nathan Chubb, what do you have to tell us all about why we should vote for you and where you live and what you're up to?
Yeah, I live in Ormwood Park, and I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for everything you do to inform the public and encourage active civic participation. I'm running because I want my daughter to grow up in a city that is safer, more equitable, and that she can afford to live in. I'm the only candidate who's done the work. As president of SAND, I represent 7 diverse communities in Southeast Atlanta. I've worked with the city and the Beltline to get a protected path built on Bill Kennedy Way, connecting neighborhoods both south and north of I-20. I've worked with our state legislators and GDOT to move along safety improvements on Moreland Avenue, and I've worked with local developers on the delivery of affordable housing. Professionally, I'm a state auditor, which uniquely qualifies me to dig into the root causes of our challenges, including the recent spate of violent crime and delivery of basic services, to understand how our government finances work, and to provide increased accountability in government. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clubb. Russell Hobson, tell us about yourself.
I'd also like to thank all of the organizations, specifically the League of Women Voters and the ACLU, for having this. My name is Russell Hobson, 16-year resident of historic South Atlanta, 20-year resident of Atlanta. I grew up in Hampton, Virginia, the son of one of the men who sat at the Woolworth's counter in Greensboro, North Carolina, one of the first sit-ins of the Civil Rights Movement. And my mother marched on Washington. I have a legacy of service in my family, and I've applied that legacy to this work that I do in our communities. I am a former MPU president, neighborhood president. I sit on the board, the AB 67 for the Beltline, and I'm on the board for Morehouse Healthcare. I want to have this role. People ask me why I'm running, because I want to help more people. I don't care about any accolades for myself. I just want to make sure that the humans with which this district represents have the best and most fair shot at a way forward and a healthy and happy life.
Thank you, Mr. Hobson. Kelly Jean Lee.
Hey, my name is Kelly Jean Lee. I am an educator with almost 10 years in the classroom, and I sit on the executive board for Lakewood Heights, which is the part of the district where I live. The story that I tell about myself, which is sort of encompasses why I'm running and the things that I most care about, are I'm the daughter of a single mom who by the age of 25 had 2 kids under 3. She only had a high school diploma, and what she needed to do was find affordable housing with access to transit and a school system that could take care of my run-of-the-mill educational needs, but also take care of my brother, who was unfortunately born with a chromosomal abnormality and a number of other deficits that he's worked his whole life to overcome. And she was able to do that. And because she was able to find affordable housing with access to transit in a school district that could take care of both my brother and I'm a first-generation college student. I'm the first person in my family to buy a home, and my brother received workforce development training that allowed him to be a productive member of our society. So those are things that I think are really important that we make sure that all Atlantans have access to.
Thank you, Ms. Lee. Victor D. Tate, talk to us.
Well, good evening, everybody. I share the other candidates' sentiments and appreciation for the opportunity to be here. And I'm so honored to be amongst these tremendous candidates. I am Victor Tate. I am a native of Atlanta and District 1. I've been here all of my life, with the exception of 3 years that I spent in New Jersey, Sally, at Princeton, working on my master's divinity there. So I'm quite familiar with Nassau Street. Born and raised in Atlanta, right in the district, and grew up right here, walking to Grant Park almost every day in the summer and making my aunts and cousins carry me back home afterwards. I'm senior pastor of First Mount Pleasant Baptist Church in East Atlanta, where I have served for almost 20 years. In addition to that, I do quite a bit of civic work because I am very involved in this notion of church partnering with community. In fact, currently working on a doctorate of ministry degree, working on that. I believe that I'm uniquely gifted and skilled to be able to bring all stakeholders to the table, both our faith-based community, along with our schools, along with our constituents in public safety.
Thank you, Reverend Tate. Jason Winston, we are looking forward to hearing from you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for hosting this event, and I really appreciate you, Sally. My name is Jason Winston. I'm a native of West Point, Georgia, but I've called Atlanta home for over 22 years, of which about 17 of those have been in actually District 1. I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm a small business owner, I'm a community volunteer, and I'm also a professor at Georgia State University, where I teach undergraduate marketing. I've been a chair of the Grant Park Conservancy Board. I've also been on a Park Pride Visioning Committee, where we've helped reimagine our community as it gets closer to the Atlanta Beltline. I've also been a longtime volunteer at the Boys and Girls Club here in the community, and I'm ready to roll up my sleeves and continue serving our community at a very high level, which is why I'm ready to run for Atlanta City Council for District 1. Thank you.
Thank you. I thought we would spend a little time now talking from the bottom to the top of the issues that are in front of Atlanta. And let's start at the very bottom. How about potholes? And I'd love to do this alphabetically. And then when we finish with this question, we'll take the next question and work alphabetically in the other direction. Okay. So that means, Mr. Blaylock, talk to me about potholes and what you think Atlanta could do better to have fewer of them.
Well, we do have a few of them in District 1 on Boulevard, and that is scheduled for repaving. So I'm glad that we're making progress on that, and also on DeKalb Avenue. I think we just have to prioritize these streets first. We do need to, perhaps when we budget, look at shifting funding to our roads, to transportation. I say the state of our roads, when I compare it to the northern parts of the city, DeKalb Avenue, Boulevard, all our roads south of 20, they're in very poor shape. And I cannot say exactly why. It might be more truck traffic, it may be just delayed maintenance, but they're certainly neglected. And I would like to use our auditors, use independent auditors to find out what we're doing with this money and why we aren't dealing with our pothole issues, and is it properly funded.
Thank you. Mr. Clubb, have you got some other ideas?
Yeah, and I completely agree at the challenge with South Boulevard. That place has got giant potholes. I hit one with my bike and thought I was going to die. I think we need to really look at the root causes. So I think at first we need to ensure we have a system in place to comprehensively track where our potholes are, track the time it takes in order to be able to fill the potholes, see who's going to be responsible, ensure they're held accountable for filling those potholes. And if they're not able to do it in a timely manner, determine what the reason is. Is it a staffing issue? Is it an issue where we don't have enough funding allocated towards it? You really got to get down to the root causes of some of these challenges. And that's what I do as a state auditor. We go into programs, we see what's supposed to be delivered. If they're not delivering the way they're supposed to, we figure out whether it's an operational, budgetary, or other legislative issue that we have to address. And even when we're dealing with kind of the smallest issues that have some of the biggest impacts on our lives, like potholes, we need to take a similar approach.
Thank you. I realize it is not as sexy as many of the other ideas out there, but it is pretty basic if it's your car and your front end alignment. Mr. Hobson, I noticed nobody has yet mentioned the new transportation department put in place by the incumbent mayor. Do you think that's a good idea, and is it working? That's a really pothole question.
Well, first of all, it was necessary. Yes. And working, I think the jury's still out in the sense that we need to give it more time to kind of find its feet. With regards to the actual question, I think it's important to say that we need to make sure that funds are allocated before we approve the funds, meaning that a lot of times, even for instance, with the previous T-SPLOS, it's like it becomes this piggy bank, and people can be like, hey, I want to make a shiny bridge over Northside Drive, or hey, I want to augment a parking structure, or whatever the case may be. But in actuality, probably we need to make sure before funds are approved that there is a legitimate and stepwise method by which we go through the approval process of where these funds are going, and have it pretty much set before the money is earmarked, how the funds will be distributed. And I think it's common sense to take care of sidewalks and potholes first and foremost before we go for the bells and whistles.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Lee, what are your thoughts?
So first of all, I had an amusing moment the other day. I have a 3-year-old who was playing in the kitchen while I was making dinner, and she informed me that our kitchen floor had potholes and I needed to talk to the city to make sure that they were addressed. And so you know that you are running for city council if your toddler's pretend play involves potholes. And so the things that I think about most are making sure that we're staffed up across the city. I know that we are experiencing significant labor shortages, especially where it comes to our more hands-on jobs and our more manual jobs, including sanitation, which I know was not part of this question, but it's definitely across the board. And so making sure that we're paying a livable wage to all of our manual laborers across the city is something that is really important for all of us. It means that we can make sure that we receive the services that our tax dollars are paying for, because we can pay for these services all day long, but if we don't have anyone filling the jobs to make sure that our potholes get filled, then we're not going to get the services that we paid for. And we also just shortly need to make sure that we are using the funds that we say we're going to use in the way we say we're going to use them, which historically is something that we've had a little bit of a struggle with. Thank you, Ms. Lee. Dr. Tate.
Well, in addition to all of those suggestions that have already been made, I think one of the other things that we should strongly consider, in addition to prioritizing funding for these things, is helping our constituents understand the extent that some of these inconveniences are part of growing pains. We mentioned Boulevard. I travel down that road every day. I'm happy to say they have gone in and soft paved those potholes going through there, right there at the belt line. Very excited about that. But again, I think that one of the things that we do, and this gets to accountability and trust from our constituency, is also communicating the challenges that go along with that. The extent that some of these are going to be just growing pains, they come with the territory, but we do have to ensure that we're able to say what we mean, do what we say, and do it in a timely manner. When that doesn't happen, I think we should just communicate with our constituents what the new time frame is of getting those things taken care of. And so over communicating and keeping people informed is important as well.
Thank you, Mr. Tate. Jason Winston.
So this is an issue that's dear to me right now, because I have a car that's in the shop right now because of tire issues, going down Boulevard. And so I know that this is an issue that has had a lot of effect on a lot of people in Atlanta, including myself. One of the solutions that I'd like to see is bring back Mayor Franklin's old pothole posse. And let's bring that back to Atlanta so we can figure out how to get these potholes filled on a regular basis. Now that goes along with the funding, but I think that, it goes, kind of what Victor said is that, these are growing pains that we're dealing with the city of Atlanta. But at the same time, we have to have quick solutions to be able to fix these problems and recognize that our infrastructure is failing, and we've got to do a better job of making sure we have quick fixes when we do have problems such as potholes throughout the city of Atlanta.
Okay, that leads me into a question of responsibility and taking things into account, which is the 311 system. Is it working well? Are people who have a complaint of a non-urgent nature getting answers effectively through 311? Mr. Winston, let's start with you.
In theory, I think this is a great idea. And I think that, it's supposed to help alleviate police officers from having to deal with, regular mental health crises on a regular basis. But unfortunately, wouldn't it be convenient if only mental health crises happen Monday through Friday, 7 to 7 p.m.? And that's not the regular case. A lot of these instances happen after hours, on the weekends. And so our police officers are still having to respond to a lot of these issues. So I'd like to see more funding go toward a 311 program so that we can alleviate our police officers from having to deal with a lot of the non-violent or non-urgent matters that they're being called to on a regular basis. And so I'd like to see that program expanded and us be able to utilize it a lot more than we are now.
Mr. Tate, is the 311 system working?
I agree that there has to be some enhancements there, beefing that up, increasing the numbers of persons that we have allocated in that budget to cover it in a way that it actually delivers in the way that it was designed to deliver. And I think that gets at the core of our responsibilities as municipal servants at the district level, is ensuring that these programs that are in place are working and functioning at a high level. I will agree that as we do that, that is going to help us with public service, our policing alternatives and all of the work that has been done over there, also being able to beef up that 311 to help to alleviate that, to allow our officers to have a level of cushion dealing with some incidences of crime where something is needed outside of unrest.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Lee, is 311 working now?
So I actually, my recycling bin got taken away the other day on recycling day, and I had to call 311 to get a replacement. It took me, I was on hold for 45 minutes before I was able to speak to somebody. And for a person with a job, that's really too long for most of us to sit on hold during working business hours. And so it's really important that we make sure that we get the services that we need, and we're connected to 311 in order to do that. But I know that as our delivery of city services has become unreliable because we are not paying a livable wage to many of our sanitation workers, and things are not, we have sanitation worker shortages. And so people's trash isn't getting picked up, people's lawn waste isn't getting picked up, which is something we hear a lot about in District 1. And so it's putting more of a stress on 311, even though it's a labor shortage in a completely different department. And so when I asked my 311 operator if she felt like they had adequate staffing there, she said that she did feel like they had adequate staffing, but the situations in a greater holistic network of agencies within the city were putting more pressure on the agency. And so while they feel like they're significantly staffed, we need to make sure that services are being delivered across the city to put less pressure on our 311 services to do what they are able to do.
Thank you. Russell Hobson, your thoughts?
I recall as an MPU chair when at the time the mayor's office came up with their constituency services task force, which I think was the beginning of the 311 services. And I would venture to say that 311 is effective for what it's supposed to be, which is essentially an all-purpose Band-Aid for city services that aren't running optimally. Our previous council person, Carla Smith, had she had a MacGyver in her office, Brenda. And you would call Brenda, and Brenda would be your 311. If the city ran more efficiently in a multitude of ways, in a litany of ways, 311 would not be necessary. But in the effect that is supposed to expedite other city services that are not working optimally, it is effective in this time. But I would like for us to get to a point where it is completely unnecessary.
Okay, Nathan Clubb.
When we're talking about using 311 for diversion services, yeah, I think we need to look at ensuring that we have access to that 24/7, 7 days a week. I mean, not just looking at Monday through Friday. We also need to look at ensuring we have good guidance and buy-in from APD to ensure that diversion works in the most effective manner. Then we go beyond just diversion to 311 at large. I've had a lot of communication with different 311 managers about how we can ensure that it works better. And we need to really build accountability to the system. And by that, I mean, right now, you put in a call to 311 or you use their app. It goes through 311. They divvy up to the department that's supposed to handle the problem, and the department that handles the problem might sign off on it. Then you look out your window, and it's not been taken care of. You call 311 again, and they're getting, you know, the bad end, the brunt from people calling multiple times, when it might be better to have a system in which you have a secondary sign off before these different cases get closed, so you don't have repeat callers. And so you have accountability, so we can really get to the root issue of why basic services like yard waste is not happening.
Okay, thank you. Clarence Blaylock, your thoughts on 311?
Yes, I use 311 myself. When I was out canvassing, I've noticed some missing water meter covers. I actually use Twitter because I found out that gets a very good response. So they did a very good job of that. We had a water leak on a street in my neighborhood. It was just leaking water in the street. They went and fixed that very quickly. You know, I had an issue with a business license issue. A business in Lakewood Heights was operating as a t-shirts business, but it's actually like a junkyard. And, you know, they created a case, but then the resolution wasn't good because, you know, they weren't informing me of where it was in the process. And, you know, from my experience in code enforcement, things of that nature, you really need to tell people where they are in that process and that it has come to a resolution. And there is an issue with you know, these cases being closed without a resolution. So yes, it needs some work, but a lot of times it does work very well. It just depends on what you're doing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let's broaden this a bit to affordable housing, which is something that you folks uniquely see because of the Beltline cruising through your district and its effect. Let's talk about how we're going to do it and who is going to pay for affordable housing. Let's start with you, Mr. Blaylock.
Sure. So we have an affordable housing crisis here in Atlanta, and it's a national crisis. So it's not something that's just particular to Atlanta. I think we need to activate our city properties, and that will make it cheaper for developers to build more affordable housing because you're taking the property cost out of it. So that we need, you know, the solutions we have now, they're pretty meager. They're not doing a lot of good. We're just losing affordable housing too quickly, and we're not building it quickly enough. I like upzoning because that's a solution that is cost neutral. So I think we should do our cost neutral solutions. We should work through the $50 million bond that we passed in January. We should see where we are at that point. But I am always a bigger fan of cost neutral solutions, especially when we're looking at budget deficits over the next couple of years. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Clubb?
Yeah, so a lot of our housing affordability issues it's a supply issue. So we need to ensure that we have enough housing supply to meet demand in order to be able to bring the market rate down. But in order to truly deliver affordable housing for everybody, I think we need to establish an affordable housing trust fund. And we can pay for that in a number of ways. We can use, other cities use recording fees, demolition fees. They even look at using different general obligation bonds to put funding in there. And then we can use that funds, leverage our vacant city-owned land, work with the Atlanta Land Trust and other entities in order to truly build more affordable housing. And I think we should really look at using the land trust model so that way we can maintain control of the land and ensure there's a permanency to the affordability. Beyond that, I think we need to look at building more housing where we can support it near high frequency transportation. I also think that we need to look at expanding our down payment assistance programs and having a stabilization fund so we can be more proactive and go into assisting affordable housing units and be able to work with a nonprofit partner to be able to buy that property, renovate it, and keep it permanently affordable because we're losing it. We're losing the last remnants of our affordability.
Thank you, Mr. Clubb. Mr. Hobson.
As always, Nathan leaves me with little to say on this question, which is great. What I will say is that yes, and Nathan that said everything I especially about the land trust and the affordable housing fund. What we do need to talk about more is how we calculate area median income. Area median income right now for Atlanta is determined by Atlanta, Roswell, and Sandy Springs. It is measured at right now at 83,000 for a house, for a single household. That excludes a majority of the population of the south side of the city, especially a majority of the Black population. AMI needs to either be calculated based on the zip code in which a development is going, or the zip code maybe in 3 adjoining zip codes. And if that is not going to be done, we need to earmark in new developments at least 33% to 50% of the housing rated at 30% AMI versus 80 or 60%, which is still exclusionary of a large swath of the population.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Lee?
So the gentlemen who spoke before me have all filled in some of the blanks that I would have filled in for sure. You know, as a public school educator, when I bought my home, the bank gave me a budget that was equivalent to 50% AMI, which as a public school educator with at that time 5 years in the classroom, it seems like I should have not ended up with a budget so low. And there are many people who do not make as much money or have as much job security as our public school teachers do, but that leaves so much of our population out in the cold. And so for me, you know, I really think a lot about filling the missing middle of our housing economy and making sure that we're building housing in a variety of price points and sizes. We need to free up the Atlanta Housing Authority land that we have so much of in our district that could be reactivated for housing. We also need to streamline the permitting process to get more housing stock on the market faster. You know, as I've talked to people who are even doing work on their own personal homes around the city, the permitting process has really held up what they are doing, and anyone building homes is under so much more pressure from that process, meaning that we don't have homes coming to market that we can't put people into, and that again is putting pressure on the prices of our homes.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Tate?
Victor, you're muted, man.
Reverend Tate, we would love to hear from you.
Thank
There
you.
you
Sorry
go.
about that. Just talking away, right? In addition to what's been said, I think that the reimagining of some of the city-owned properties, some of those are former low-income housing areas that are undeveloped as of now, can be reimagined to ease up some of that housing crisis, the numbers of housings that we need to alleviate some of these issues. In addition to that, guys, I think that this presents an awesome opportunity for us to incentivize living within the city, within our district, with so many of our public service persons, police, firefighters, EMS, teachers, educators, others, incentivizing them living in the city by providing to them bonuses and other incentives for their living expenses. I think that so many of these persons can't afford to live in the city. And as a result of that, especially in District 1, this presents an awesome opportunity for us to work with developers in getting incentives specifically for our city employees and workers.
Okay. Mr. Winston?
Sure, let me see if I can say something that hasn't been said. So a couple of things that I would do. First of all, the city owns over 900 acres of land that is underutilized. And so I would make it a priority to develop that land. And so I would prioritize, set a second layer of prioritization around public transportation. Now, the city is going to need a dedicated funding source for this. And so I would look into creating a dedicated funding source for creating the revenue to be able to pay for the affordable housing throughout the city of Atlanta. And then also, I know what it meant for me and my family. You know, I always say I married up, not just in beauty, but in smarts. My wife was able to find a down payment assistance program through what is now Invest Atlanta that helped pay for our first home. And so it really helped set us up on the trajectory that we've had in our life. Now, that same program only pays up to $14,000 towards a home, which is inadequate because the average house now costs $450,000 in our district. So we've got to figure out how we can improve upon programs such as this that exist right now in the city of Atlanta.
Okay. Thank you. Let's do what I guess a talk show host would say is a lightning round. And what I would like each of you to do is assign a number from 1 to 10, bad to good, for your opinion of the current job of the Atlanta Housing Authority. Let's start with you, Mr. Winston. What number?
I would say a 4.
Mr. Tate? We're hoping this is We're hoping
you
this
said
is a
6.
lightning round. Mr. Tate, you're going to give him a 6. Okay, Ms.
6.
Lee?
I agree with Jason. We're definitely south of 5.
South of 5. Okay,
Mhm.
Mr. Hobson?
5, just because I'm trying to be positive.
Mr. Club?
3, because I'm slightly less positive than Russell.
Mr. Blaylock?
I'm going to go with 2 because it could always be worse.
Oh my goodness. Oh, if you're on the board of the Housing Authority, I think you need to be trembling about who's coming in from District 1. Okay, I don't want to belabor that anymore because you, if you are elected, have a significant role to play in cooperation with the Housing Authority. And it'll be important to see what happens with that. Let's talk Beltline for a minute, because that is one of the most important factors that seems to me to be changing life around Atlanta. Mr. Blaylock, are we doing a good job getting the Beltline built? And do you think we need transit on it?
Well, we passed the SSD. I had some issues with that because I think that is going to get rid of affordable housing. So I had concerns about it when it passed. So I thought we should have found another funding mechanism, but we are doing better about pursuing the federal grants. The part that's in District 1, we are on a quicker timeline here for District 1. And, in District 5 it's built, and in the Southwest it's built, and now we're finally going to have it built in our district. But as far as Beltline Rail, that's what the people in this district voted for. That's what we need. I'm a strong proponent for Beltline Rail. I believe we all are. I'm not going to speak for other people. I just know that I certainly support Beltline Rail. I think that's part of the vision along with affordable housing. So we're really at best getting 1 and 3 right now. I think we're really dropping the ball on it.
Okay, Mr. Club?
Well, this is timely because I just had coffee a couple weeks ago with Ryan Gravel, where we talked about the failure of the city to achieve the full vision of the Beltline. It's nice to see that we're finally starting to get our section paved. But if we really want to truly achieve the full vision, then we need to ensure that there is light rail along the entirety of it, so that way we can support the growing density. So right now we're having big apartment buildings get built with even bigger parking decks, and that's not a sustainable way to do development, and that's not a great land use. We're also failing in terms of affordable housing production along it. I think whenever we look in the future about doing some large-scale public investments like this, we need to look at doing land banking on the front side when we can afford to do it, rather than looking at doing it after we've already inflated the rates of all this property with our public investment. I think we need to ensure that we're holding MARTA accountable with pursuing innovative public-private partnerships like Denver did to do more quick delivery of their light rail expansion, and pulling down low interest rate federal loans. So that way we can start building as much today and pay it back with our sales tax funding source.
Thank you. Mr. Hobson?
I've been a volunteer with the Beltline, the AB 67, since its inception, basically a community engagement component with the partnership. And I told the Beltline then, I'm like, I'm not doing it to help y'all, I'm doing it to help the people. What is happening specifically is that a lot of the policies of the Beltline, if not for some legislation put forth, I think by Andre Dickens, to make sure that it was affordable housing abutting the Beltline, you would have seen that being even more of a rapid gentrifier in areas, and not in a good way. I think it's important for us to recognize that the Beltline has shown us how connected we can be, how public transportation could be something that could be a great gem for our city, but we need to use that as a way to inspire expansion in MARTA, also other types of public transportation that could possibly feed into the Beltline, and make sure that we are, of course, maintaining some measure of affordability along the Beltline based on some of our conversations earlier.
Okay, Ms. Lee?
So it is definitely fantastic to see the Beltline becoming more of a paved surface and less of an ankle breaker, which the South Side Trail has been for quite some time. I love the recreation aspects of the Beltline, but we really need to focus on how it can be activated for commuters. We need to make sure that it can be utilized throughout our city to connect people with jobs and services, to make sure that our least car-enabled communities have direct connection to the Beltline, so that we can make sure that they can access the Beltline as a means of transportation, be it as a cycling path, as a walking path, or hopefully eventually with rail. And we know that it's coming, but we need to make sure that our city is connected internally with transit before we reach out into the suburbs, and make sure that people can access jobs and services with not just our Beltline rail, but rail connectivity within our city. And so really making sure that the Beltline is a connector and not something that is perceived as a walking path for the privileged.
Okay, Mr. Tate?
I do think that the Beltline continues to allow an incredible opportunity for us to reimagine what inner city small transit looks like. And I just think that essentially we need to be accountable to making sure it does what it said it would do, that it would produce what it said it would produce from the very beginning. And we've got to hold ourselves and others accountable to making sure that that happens. That affordable housing piece was a big proponent, was a big selling piece for the Beltline. And we've just got to go back to that and ensure that we are able to be creative about the land use around those to make the Beltline all that it is designed to do. But in addition to that, I think that it also presents to us an opportunity for us to reimagine inner city transit, MARTA, connecting schools, direct shuttles in the morning, things of that sort. So yeah, the Beltline is working, but it needs a little more fine tuning there.
Okay, Mr. Winston?
Yes, I mean, I agree with Kelly Jean here. I think that, unfortunately what has happened is that this has become a very unaffordable corridor. When you start taking a look at the Beltline, if you look at what happened in Inman Park and that portion, there's no affordable housing in that area. And so I think that it's important that we make sure that there's affordable housing along the rest of it. But like so many other people, I'm one of those people who voted to make sure that there was rail around this. And so you have a lot of constituents that voted for the rail piece, that want it, because that is the true piece that's missing now, is how do we make this a transportation piece? Because we need to alleviate the transportation crisis that we have in the city of Atlanta. And so making rail a priority, connecting that to the rest of MARTA will help people truly be able to utilize this for more than just a recreation piece, but something that can truly connect people and get us moving throughout the city of Atlanta.
Okay, Mr. Winston, you're on tap then for the tree ordinance, which is something I hear about all the time. How come we can't get it out of the council?
We can't get it out of council because, right now developers are driving the piece of it. And so, we need to take leadership. And as a council person, I would make sure that, we lead in this in terms of figuring out how to draft legislation that changes the tree ordinance. And so what I think we need to do, and what I would do as council person, is put more incentives on people being able to actually have trees in their yard. I think right now it's the opposite. Developers get away with paying the impact fees of cutting trees down, and there's no other real implication. And so what they're doing is they're including those fees in their development prices, because they're just passing those on to the consumers because they know that they can just get away with cutting those trees down. And so what I'd like to do is see us be able to rewrite that legislation to say that you incentivize people to have trees. And by doing so, you create more value for the land that has trees on it. And so it has a reverse effect on seeing the tree canopy being preserved here in the city of Atlanta.
Okay, Ms. Lee, excuse me, Mr. Tate, I'm sorry. I skipped around a little bit. Sorry. Mr. Tate, tell me about the tree ordinance. Why can't we get that going?
One of the things that I think we should prioritize is ensuring that those protected areas stay protected. One of the challenges that I've heard with some of our local municipality programs is that there are things that are discussed in these meetings, neighborhood meetings, et cetera, that are decided upon, but then once developers come in, there's an extent that they're able to go around communities and ensuring that those mandates and those ordinances are in fact kept up. And so I think that it's important for us to protect those spaces and, as it's been said before, to incentivize those homeowners in neighborhoods that prioritize having trees in their yards and in their neighborhoods. I think that that's pretty important for us.
Ms. Lee, do you see the failure to pass this tree ordinance as a function of the council's dysfunction?
So the failure to pass the tree ordinance seems to me like there are a lot of cooks in the kitchen, and we all are beholden, of course, to all of our constituents, and all of the different neighborhoods really seem to be united in wanting the tree ordinance to be passed. And so if people are for it, we need to make sure the council is pushing through legislation that the constituency wants. We need to make sure that we make it more incentivized to keep our trees than to remove them, but we also need to be realistic about the health of our trees and make sure that we're maintaining and an unhealthy tree is an unsafe tree. So we also want to make sure that we make more allowances, considering the health and age of trees, to make sure that we have a healthy tree canopy, not just a present tree canopy. And so thinking really holistically about the health of our tree ecology and the health of our tree ecosystem as we move forward with this legislation, I think is really important.
Okay, Mr. Hobson?
I don't know if my buddy Clarence is rubbing off on me, but I am becoming more and more about helping these trees by any means necessary. I think that we need to first make sure that the arborist department of the city of Atlanta is much more engaged, because we have way too many tree-based calamities based on trees not being properly upheld and upkept. That doesn't exactly answer your question, but I think what's most important is protecting the trees, tree canopies, and developers will find a way to make their money. They don't have to cut down large trees to make it happen in most instances. And I'm more of a fan of seeing how we could be a more environmentally friendly city. And that includes obviously trying to do all we can to protect the trees. And that probably would be the way I fall on it. So if somebody's on the other side, then they might be in for a fight with me too.
Okay, Mr. Clubb, why don't we have this? It's been 2 years in the making and it hadn't passed yet.
I think some of it goes back to the disagreement between a lot of the entities involved with this. I mean, it was just late spring, early summer this year that Trees Atlanta was starting to actually come on board with what the new tree protection ordinance was going to be. There's a lot of folks that are pushing for more stringent, better controls over it. And there's still some things missing from it I'd like to see in there. For example, there's no goal established. I mean, is the goal here to have, 40% tree cover, 50% tree cover? We need to figure out what our end game is in order to be able to ensure the tree protection ordinance actually is going to deliver on that. I think there's also would be some good opportunities to do some case studies like Trees Atlanta suggested, where we actually go out to different properties that are going through development right now to see, okay, would the tree protection ordinance actually save more trees? Would create a better ecosystem? Or there's loopholes and things around us that we're not even thinking of that we might have to make a few more tweaks to it. And then after we get that done, we just need to prioritize it and get it passed, because we are the city in the forest. We need to protect that. We particularly need to protect, some of the large swaths of forest that we still have remaining, like one of Clarence's favorite topics, the old prison farm.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Blaylock, your thoughts?
Oh, thank you. Thank you for the kind words, Russell and Nathan. I appreciate it. I want you to know you guys made me a better candidate too. So the tree ordinance is not being passed. I think it is because of the developers. I'm an advocate for the strongest version of the revision, the citizens blended draft. It's one of the reasons I don't accept donations from developers. They've had too much control in this city for too long. And, I want to be an independent voice for this district. And I think that's a part of it for me. So, it was a central platform because I know it wasn't going to pass this term. And, that is how we're going to mitigate the effects of climate change at the local level, is strengthening our tree ordinance, preserving our tree cover, and possibly expanding it to 50%. I mean, we're already #1. We're in danger of losing that to Charlotte. I don't want that to happen. We're better than Charlotte in every way. I think we can all agree on that. We just have to stay the best. And, it really is a lot. It has to do with climate change. This is how we do mitigate the effects. And to me, it's my #1. And that's why I talked about it in my intro. So thank you.
Okay, we heard you and I appreciated it. Let's go to one now. I'm delighted that we've gotten so far into this panel without talking about crime, because it seems to be the issue that eats the election. But let's spend some quality time now thinking about what we can do, what we have done, what the loss of Buckhead might mean, and if that would be contingent strictly on crime. And if any of you are going to beat up the news media, I'm with you. We have not necessarily performed well in being realistic about crime in Atlanta. So spare me the complaints about lousy reporters and assignment editors. I know that news media has a great deal to do with the perception of crime, but let's deal with the real crime. And Mr. Blaylock, let's start with you.
Well, I just want to talk about a few things that are really sort of underserved by the media. Most victims of crime in the city of Atlanta are not you, but are victims of lower socioeconomic classes. I think it's horrible what happened to Miss Janice in Piedmont Park, but that the majority of people who die in this city are from lower socioeconomic classes. We are not doing enough to give people opportunities, to give them hope, to give them workforce training, to get them out of a lifestyle, and a lot of these people are children. The people who stole Antonio Brown's car were children. And, you know, we are not doing enough for them. We are not taking care of the root causes of crime. Unfortunately, we prioritize things like the training facility, which will not be available for a couple of years as a solution to crime. That does nothing for our immediate issues, but crime is up everywhere. But I'm very interested in looking at the root causes of crime in this city. Thank you.
Mr. Clubb, how bad is it in the first district?
Well, it's consistently one of the things that folks talk to me. It's one of their top issues when I'm outdoor knocking. I kind of put together a white paper on my thoughts on my website, nathanclubb.com. But I think we need to take a comprehensive approach to it. So that's looking short-term tactically at ensuring that we're focusing our resources on gun violence and violent crime. We also need to look at using group intervention programs, so that way we can involve the community, and using community policing, so that way we can both have a presence, but hopefully try to rebuild a lot of the broken trust in the communities. We also need to understand that all kinds of things impact public safety. So we need to look at everything from ensuring our diversion programs are working well, to ensuring that we have supportive housing to deal with our homeless crisis, to ensuring that there's economic opportunity, youth activities, everything we need to do, from even including safe streets. I've been hit by a car while biking. It's terrifying. I have a new baby girl who I want to bike to her daycare pretty soon when she's old enough, and it kind of scares me to be out there on the road when we have roads that are not engineered to be safety. So we need to address all of those public safety challenges.
Mr. Hobson, is crime out of control in District 1?
I don't think so. I think that what has happened is a disinvestment in certain communities, leading to such a disparity that there is a clamoring, an uprising of individuals who need more opportunity, need more of a step up, and we are failing these individuals to the point where crime is a natural offset. I will say that I have consistently, as an MPU chair, talked to my major. I still call my zone major, even though I'm not an MPU chair anymore, because you got to know what they're really dealing with. I had a conversation this past week with Officer King. I had to write his name. Officer King, who is the city's LGBTQ plus coordinator and liaison. The community-oriented policing service of the city of Atlanta used to have 20 officers. It's down to 7. Crime prevention is a handshake between neighbors, individuals, and communities, and the police, and how they communicate, how they collaborate, and how they address different concerns. And as our police force has become diminished due to several factors, we haven't been able to bolster that as much, which would really do a great job of addressing the crime issue.
Thank you. Ms. Lee?
So I agree with a lot of what's been said, and we end up sort of walking the same paths often at forums where we're asked questions on similar topics and end up saying a lot of the same things that each other have said before, which is fantastic. It means that we all know that wraparound services for families are one of the key things that we need to make sure that our community is safer, that we need more holistic programs that consider youth development. As a teacher, especially over the past years during the pandemic, a lot of our kids never logged on, and there was no real accountability for where they were. Where they were was most likely not at home, sitting in front of their computer, doing their classwork. They were out in the community doing things that unfortunately got them into some trouble. And so we need to dial that back and make sure our youth are supported in and around and after school. We also need to make sure that we are diverting our nonviolent cases to organizations like PAD, which is a fantastic initiative that needs to be expanded so that our police can do what they need to do in a very narrow focus. And I am being cut off, so I'm going to stop now because I could talk about this a lot.
Thank you, Ms. Lee. I appreciate it. Mr. Tate, your thoughts?
I share the sentiment that has been already put out there by the other candidates, but I also want to just add to that the extent that I really believe one of the things that is a golden opportunity for us is to get back to sort of neighborhood policing as it pertains to petty crimes, things that are going on in our neighborhoods. We have an awesome initiative where we want to incentivize video doorbells, adding another level of security to our neighborhoods, being able to have entire streets, blocks, neighborhoods to say we are a Ring doorbell neighborhood, right? These kind of grassroots things that we can do to become the change that we want to see, right? To be a part of the solutions. There'll never be enough police officers to police every corner of every part of this district or the city, but we can come up with common sense neighborhood programs that will help us in that regard.
Thank you. Thank you. Jason Winston?
So this is a big issue to people that have been victimized. And I think one of our responsibilities on city council is to make sure that citizens of Atlanta feel safe. You know, my neighbor 2 doors down, his grandson was just murdered in the city of Atlanta. And this is a young man that I coached at the Boys and Girls Club in our neighborhood. So people like this is an issue that is near and dear, and it's something that we have to figure out how to find solutions for. So some solutions that I'd like to come up with on day one and work with council would be, first of all, we have to address our police officer deficit. So we got to hire more police officers and get them into the city of Atlanta, because right now there's a deficit, which means we also have to address their compensation. And so we've got to figure out how to get more compensation to make Atlanta a more attractive place for police officers to be able to live. And that also ties into the affordable housing crisis that we have and being able to get community policing. And so one other solution that I'd like to advocate for if on council is to get a mini precinct in our district, because right now we don't have a mini precinct in our district. And I'm not advocating for more armed police officers to patrol our streets. I'm from a small town where we knew the police officers because we saw them in the grocery store. We saw them, you know, throughout the community. And so I'd like that to be a community place where officers were able to be in our community and we see them on a regular basis.
Thank you, Mr. Winston. I must say, all of you have been very good about this 1 minute limit, and you've been thoughtful and you've been analytical, and you have piled on a little bit about everybody said just the same thing a few minutes ago. But that's partly, as you have pointed out, because you've done this and you seem to share a good grip on the issues in the first district. Let me ask you a tougher one about corruption in Atlanta, which has certainly been an issue raised in several of the races, not necessarily yours. Do you have a sense that Atlanta's corruption is greater than it used to be, or is it getting better? Mr. Winston?
So I don't think it's better or less than it has been. I think what we have to do is address and figure out how we have more transparency in government. And so I'd like to see a more transparent, open government where people are able to see what's happening on a regular basis with our elected officials. You know, we're now in this Zoom, world where people are able to dive in and be able to be more engaged in community and the government process. And so I'd like to see more of that transparency being carried over into what we do long term. So when more eyeballs on what we're doing and the services that we're offering as a city, then more people can get engaged, and see then there's less opportunity for corruption in our government, the more people that are watching and the more transparency that we have.
Dr. Tate, we've got some indictments that are waiting trial. What are your thoughts? We've also had some guilty pleas.
Agreed. I think that that accountability that stems from every level of local government is in place. I agree that all of our meetings should have the ability to have some real-time evaluation and viewing of those. And if not in real time, they should be made immediately known across the board. Unfortunately, politics is one of those areas that kind of has that air of impropriety that comes along with it. But I think that Atlanta, I know in District 1, there's coming up a crop of individuals who are not going to tolerate corruption at any level, that are intentional about full transparency and will ensure that we continue to have common sense approaches to ensure that there is transparency at every level of our local government and beyond, and that people will continue to be held to account when impropriety takes place.
Okay, Ms. Lee?
There are so many ways that we can leverage 21st century technology to create more transparency and accountability within government. And I think because of the pandemic, we've learned about so many of them and they've become commonplace technologies in our lives. And so we need to hybridize a lot of the processes of government to make sure that they're accessible in person as well as through formats like Zoom, but also using digital fingerprints to make sure that anyone handling files leaves a little trail behind, so we can make sure that we all know who's been touching what, whose hands are where, and so that we can make sure that we build back the trust in city government. As you move around, people ask you questions in the district and you'll say, I feel this way, and they'll be like, all politicians say that when they want to get elected, but they don't trust us to do that when we get into the job. And so we need to really show up and show our constituency that regardless of whether corruption has gotten better, it's going to get better when we get there to do the work. And I do think it's gotten a little bit better, I hope.
Okay. Mr. Hobson, do we need the U.S. Attorney to police the municipal government in Atlanta?
I think it might be time for some external oversight on some things that we've seen over the past few years. Everybody said such amazing statements regarding transparency and accountability. I think one thing that we could potentially do to make sure that we weed out a level of corruption is establish term limits for even city council people. After somebody's been in office for about a couple terms, their whole reason for being in office kind of changes and shifts, and they start thinking, how can I stay in this role? Once you lose the, Carla Smith always talks about the term fire in your belly. That fire doesn't stay in your belly for very long, you know, when you've been kind of grinding it out. I think we need to maybe think about having shorter, more compact amounts of time to give service, and then let people enjoy the rest of their lives.
Okay. Okay. Mr. Clubb?
Well, as a state auditor, I live, eat, and breathe the government accountability, ethics, and all that good stuff. So if you want someone who's going to get in there and nerd out about the Green Book and internal controls and ensuring that's in place so that we don't have the ethics and corruption violations that we have going on, that's what I'll be doing. I also think we need to do things like, we made a step forward with creating the open checkbook to allow some more citizen oversight of expenditures, but it's entirely inaccurate. It's difficult to navigate. It's not been updated correctly. We talked before about the $30 million bridge that was completely unnecessary. And we don't even really know fully what that cost, because people went to the open checkbook and they calculated a number. The mayor's office says a different number. Who's right? We shouldn't have those multi-million dollar inconsistencies between that open checkbook and what the public can see. I think we also need to ensure we have proper guide rails around every sort of program we do. If we pass another T-SPLOS, we ensure that we have a prioritized list of what's going to be funded. So that way we can't have politicians taking those monies and putting them in towards pet projects, because that can lead to ethics and corruption, and we need to prevent that from occurring.
Thank you, Mr. Clubb. Mr. Blaylock?
Yes, I would say that, you know, from listening to the current members of council in these forums and from their own words, there is less corruption than there used to be in the city of Atlanta. But if we need to put more resources into independent auditors, I would be fine with that. And, you know, we're elected to legislate. You know, we can't be auditors ourselves. We're politicians. We'll never be independent. It's just not an appropriate role for us. But I will say that anyone who's not been convicted has passed the legal threshold to run for office. That's not up for me to decide. I wish the feds would go ahead and either convict or clear people, so, you know, the voters will know that someone who they elect will not be removed during their term. I think I really am not happy with the feds for that. So, you know, I just wish they would remove that cloud of suspicion. So basically, you know, I don't understand why they waited this long and why they would do it in the next year. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. You guys have been great. And I've got one more quick round, because I do know that we've got some great questions coming in from the actual people who actually can vote for you folks. But before we do that, here's one more lightning round. Let's assume each one of you is at the end of a busy work day and is ready to go out with your besties for a quick dinner. The favorite restaurant in District 1. Okay, Mr. Blaylock.
My favorite?
Yep.
I'm going to go with, oh man, I love all these new restaurants and some. I'm going to do a big shout out to Little Bear. I also love the Second Maypole. I love Dakota Blue. Even supporting Jason, I still love them. Thank you.
I think I may have opened a can of worms here. Mr. Clubb, let's talk about one favorite restaurant.
I think one that's near and dear to my heart is Red's Beer Garden, just because they activated a space that had been closed for many years, since providing a nice level activation on South Boulevard. They've been great community leaders.
Okay, Mr. Hobson?
The tie, Zebas and Estrellita.
Ooh, okay. Ms. Lee, where are you taking your family?
So it really depends on what I'm in the mood for, but I'm so often in the mood for Asian food, and Spoon Thai in Ormwood is one of my favorite Asian restaurants in East Atlanta, but barbecue would definitely be Woods Chapel, of course, in Summerhill.
Dr. Tate?
I have to say I had an incredible hot dog at Hot Dog Pete's just the other day. But Little Ozio is one of my all-time faves to run in and grab something.
Okay, Jason Winston, take me to another restaurant. Where are you going?
Sally, this is like asking a future politician which kid do they like the most.
I know.
I can't really answer this question. But I've got a couple, Dakota Blue, Hero Donuts, we like Tria Cocina. So there's a couple of that I could take you depending on whether it's breakfast, lunch, or dinner. We can go down the line on that.
Man, I think all of you are giving me a good taste for supper tonight. Thank you. And let's see if we've got some questions. Chinye and Nora, you are in charge, I do believe. What are folks asking us for?
Yes, we have two really fantastic questions coming from our audience. The first question that we have is actually for our candidates. What committee do you see yourself joining to make a difference in transportation, public safety, and the loyalty population?
Okay, why don't we mix this up a little bit? Mr. Russell Hobson, why don't you start?
You'll come at me first with that whole, okay. I would say, honestly, given my history, public safety, I've worked with so many people in the Atlanta Police Department, and I've worked with Fulton County with regards to pre-trial and pre-arrest diversion programs. And I genuinely think that public safety is about addressing the root cause. And I think we could definitely apply more resources to addressing root causes, particularly wraparound services and disinvestment in youth. So it would be, I don't need the whole minute.
Okay, safety. Great. Dr. Tate, what are your thoughts?
I hate to run behind Russell with the exact same thing, but that'd be one of mine as well. I think that public safety is so important, but specifically from the perspective of, I've heard so many say root causes, and root causes is important. I'd like to see us, really take an opportunity to prioritize grandparents, senior legacy residents, who are raising school-age children. A lot of people realize that now, because of that, those older residents don't have the resources that they need to raise those school-age children, and we need to specifically allocate some time and resources to that. That's why a lot of those young people are out in the streets, because grandmom or granddad can't quite manage them the same. A senior hotline would be important for that as well. So public safety.
Okay, Mr. Clubb, what are your thoughts? And I think we're talking about specific committees here.
I was recently told that I'd be great on transportation. I think that's because I have a deep background and it's something I'm very passionate about. Public safety is very important too. But ensuring that as we look through the MARTA bus system redesign, ensuring that's done in an effective way that has increases in frequency, ensures that folks throughout District 1 can have access to public transportation to get to their job, to get to school, to get groceries, to get to any places of education. We also have lots of opportunities to reconfigure our roads, to prioritize pedestrians, to build an actual connected network of bike infrastructure, because we're going to need to be able to move around a lot more people as we grow. And that's going to require being very proactive and looking at all sorts of modes of transportation. And that's what I'd love to dig into.
Okay. Jason Winston, what committee would we see you on?
Well, I think we get 3 if we get elected, but I think one that I would make sure that I would also want to be on the transportation committee. And the reason being is because there's already a certain amount of allocated projects that are coming to our district. And I want to make sure that we move those through very quickly. We do them in a very engageful and thoughtful process that has the community involved in that process. And there's also federal dollars that may be coming to our district as well. So I want to be a champion and an advocate to make sure that those dollars are spent well in our district. And I'll be our biggest cheerleader, making sure that they all come our way.
Okay. Ms. Lee?
So Lakewood Heights specifically, and also NPY generally, has been on the forefront of a lot of real changes as far as housing development, redevelopment, and zoning. And so I have, over the past couple of years, sitting on the executive board for Lakewood Heights, become a quick study on zoning, and housing programs are something that I'm really passionate about. So the community development and Human Services Committee. I think that also dovetails in with my experience as an educator in the classroom, and sort of the work that I've done over the course of my life would really put me in a good position to be an asset on the Community Development and Human Services Committee.
Okay, very good. Mr. Blaylock?
Well, as far as which committees I'm on, it does depend on, who's elected city council president, who's also, we're gonna have a lot of turnover on council. Who else is in there? I would say with my background in a planning department, I would say zoning and community development would be probably pretty good fits. And I think they would feel the same. Thanks.
Okay, I think I've got everybody. I don't think I missed anybody. Nobody's putting their hand up for finance, I noticed. Okay, how about another question? Chinye, we got another one?
We do have another one, Sally. For the candidates, would you support an ordinance that would mandate every city, would you support an ordinance that would mandate every city of Atlanta contract to allocate a percentage of jobs for that project to local residents?
Local residents. Okay, that's a good one. Mr. Blaylock, let's start with you and let's go alphabetical this time so I can make sure I don't miss anybody.
I think that's a very interesting idea. I think a lot of contracts, they do go to larger businesses. I think local businesses getting them is very interesting. I think we've made a lot of progress getting contracts to minority-owned business in the past. I think that's something the city's done a pretty good job of, but we can always do more. And I would look forward to working with council, and if we can get the 8 votes for it, yeah, I think that's something we should strongly consider. Thanks.
Mr. Clubb?
I think it's definitely something we should look into the feasibility of. I know, for example, when in conversations with ATL DOT Commissioner Josh Rowan, he's talked about how we can try to provide smaller contracts and smaller businesses to try to get them help prepared, so they learn how to go through the procurement process, how to work with the city, and how to deliver on particularly local transportation projects, because we frankly don't have enough of the contractors who are qualified to do some of the bigger projects, and that's one of the reasons we have delays and why projects get bid out for a lot more than we initially planned on. And I think that kind of feeds off of the need to ensure that we're building up communities throughout the city, throughout every single district. Of course, there's going to be some contracts that might not be feasible to do based on the size of the contract and the availability of a qualified local contractor. But we should definitely go through the steps to see how far we can take it.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hobson?
Absolutely. And if we do not have enough qualified people here, I think that some type of allocation should be made for creating the training mechanisms possible to bring folks into those folds, specifically the film industry. In addition, the film industry, they now make more things in Georgia than they do in California. And a lot of that is still outsourced talent. These are obviously highly skilled jobs, but they can be trained here. And we can use some of our workforce development structure that is being underutilized currently to kind of get those people up to speed and get those jobs here.
Okay, Ms. Lee?
So I think that we definitely need to prioritize spaces sort of as a first come for our local community members. And I definitely agree that we need more workforce development in our community to make sure that we have people ready to step up and fill these roles. We also do need to continue to assure that our minority business owners are receiving support and receiving priority spaces on city contracts, because while work has been done, not enough work has been done. And so we need to continue doing that work.
Mr. Tate?
Absolutely, 100% yes. This is a model that we've seen happen over the last several decades with major projects that absolutely help small businesses, minority-owned businesses, and others. And I think that it is something that's proven, right? We don't have to go back and recreate that wheel. But as it's been said before, tremendous opportunities abound with the film industry, hospitality industry as a whole, several others. And these are great opportunities for us to partner with our schools. I grew up in Atlanta, graduated from Archer High School, closed it down. And I remember the magnet programs. That's where every high school specifically catered to a specific industry set. And that was an enormous opportunity to ensure that our graduates came out of high school, whether or not they went on to college or the military, with a specific skill set. And so again, there are tremendous opportunities that abound with that. And of course, that speaks to public safety and getting young people off the street, and these water boys, getting them the training that they need, because they obviously have some leadership and salesmanship, but they need to have some persons who are concerned enough to have some real impact and contact in their lives. Great opportunity for that.
Thank you, Dr. Tate. Jason Winston, local set-asides.
Oh, yes, I think that, I would make sure that the city's procurement process continues to be equitable and inclusive of minority-owned businesses. But I would also take it a step further. I would focus on training and making education and making sure that our minority-owned businesses can be the best business to be able to win contracts throughout the city based on their knowledge and skill set. And so I think that should be our priority, is making sure that they're not only just getting the opportunities, but that we give them the training and the facilitation that they need to be able to be the ones that could win jobs based on their merit completely. Okay,
thank you. Chinye, how are we doing? Have we got another couple of questions, or do we need to start heading toward a wrap up?
Actually, our candidates just wrapped up our final question.
Okay, very good. I think I think what you mean is it's time to wrap up now, right?
Wait, well, let me see. It looks like
we've got a few minutes as I read it. We've 7:13.
Yeah, forgive me. We have, in the Zoom, we have our Q&A section, but it looks like there was some information that was put in the chat as well.
Okay.
So I actually have two more.
Oh, good, good.
Yeah, and the first one that I see that came through the chat area of the Zoom is, how do you plan to make sure our senior loyalty community afford to live in their homes? It goes on to say, tax on loyalty communities displace our seniors who have stayed in the city and paid the taxes to keep our city moving. How do you plan to create a safety net for us?
Okay, I'm hearing that as a displacement question. If that's okay with you, Chinye, to sort of make sure we've got our arms around that question. Loyalty, legacy, how do we keep the people who put up with the bad times and give them the benefit of the good times? And why don't we use this as an opportunity to give us your own thoughts about what's wrong with the city and how that could make it better in the gentrification displacement world? Why don't we start with Mr. Winston?
So first of all, I think one issue that I've seen in talking to voters is, and especially some of our legacy longtime residents, is that they're unaware of how to take advantage of a lot of the homestead exemptions that are already currently available to them. There's such a short window for them to be able to take advantage of it. A lot of times in instances, they have to go down to City Hall to be able to get it done. And especially we're living in this pandemic world, that has created a tremendous burden on a lot of our legacy residents to be able to do that. And so what I'd like to see is, instead of them having to renew that every couple of years, is that it's a one-time thing, and then they wouldn't have to worry about renewing their homestead exemptions anymore, so that they could take advantage of the tax exemptions that are available to them. Second of all, I'd like to see us be able to freeze taxes at a certain age for our legacy and long-time residences. I think one of the realistic numbers to me would be 57, because at that point, people are planning for retirement, and it helps them become really comfortable of being able to decide, where they're going to be able to place their retirement, how they're going to live comfortably post-working.
Thank you, Mr. Winston. Dr. Tate?
I agree that this is an important issue. I've had quite a few conversations with constituents and seniors in particular around this notion of protecting legacy residents. I agree that we have to empower those homeowners to be informed on what is available to them as of right now. But secondly, I think that as a transparency piece for us is allowing neighbors to know ahead of time when there are projects that are in the planning stages that might require the use of things like eminent domain. And I say that in particular because I grew up on Atlanta Avenue, 2 blocks up from an area where they're trying to build a retention pond, and you have several residents who have actively been fighting against the eminent domain, the Dardens, Tanya Washington, and others, who this is very important to. And so again, ensuring that those legacy residents understand what's available to them, and also making sure that the city is upfront with saying, hey, these are programs that are coming down the pike. Let's plan with these legacy residents and ensure that they don't have to move out of the homes that they have built and the neighborhoods that they've been in all their lives.
Thank you, Dr. Tate. Ms. Lee?
So protecting long-term residents is so important to our communities. It protects the diversity of our community and make sure that our long-term residents have access to their services and jobs and places of worship that have been so important to them, but also that we have a variety of types of people living among us. It should not, we don't want to live in a neighborhood where everybody looks the same and acts the same and sounds the same and has the same sort of background and job and income. We want to make sure that we live in a diverse and vibrant and beautiful community. And we can do more to protect that with programs that we have, but there are many programs in other cities. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. I don't feel like I have a lot of ego in the jobs that I do. I do jobs to serve a community. Being an educator is one of them, and being on city council is something that I view as that as well. And so I don't need to be the first person to think of the best idea. We can talk to legislative bodies around the world and around at least the United States, especially, to make sure that we're modeling programs that work in those communities. I am getting the signal to stop, but
I can feel the fire. Thank you.
There's so much more to say on the topic of housing. It is so important to make sure that we can keep people into our neighborhoods and get more people housed across the board.
Mr. Hobson.
This is a passion point for me. I have spent a good amount of my time as a neighborhood leader, specifically in the charge of trying to educate our seniors on how to be able to maintain their housing, how to fight the system that is so adamantly opposed to them being able to age in place. I hear buzzwords dropped frequently from a lot of different sources. And I ask people, have you sat down and had dinner with a person? Have you driven them to the store? Have you done these things to make sure it really anchors in your consciousness how important it is for us to protect these humans, these people? And the ideas are plentiful. What is probably going to be most important is bringing the information directly to the individuals, because it is getting around mitigating physical limitations, mental limitations as people get older is difficult. It's about who really has the passion and who really wants to make it happen.
Okay, very good. Mr. Clubb?
Yeah, so this is it's a complex problem. And I hear about it quite a bit when I'm out door knocking, talk with neighbors, friends, concerns about long-term neighbors that are going to get pushed out of the communities that they helped make great in the first place. So a lot of it's going to be requiring us to partner with APS and Fulton County, because the city of Atlanta only accounts for about a quarter of the property tax. So we're going to all have to work together in order to keep the property taxes low enough for legacy residents for them to be able to stay in their houses. There's also mechanisms to allow for deferment of property taxes that can allow folks to be able to stay in place. And we also need to look at different grant programs, so that way people can get their roof repaired, get a kitchen fixed, whatever it takes in order to be able to stay in their house and not have a predatory commercial company come after them and try to take their property and not get attacked by code enforcement, which can be weaponized by some commercial landlords against folks that they're trying to acquire their houses from. So we'd be looking at all those types of things, as well as also concerned about renters, because they're at most risk of displacement. So we have to be ensuring that we're proactively stabilizing existing affordable housing that seniors are living in, providing more affordable housing for seniors so they don't get pushed out from our communities.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Blaylock, you'll have the last word on this idea.
Well, I still have something original for you. I like to expand the Beltline Legacy Resident Program citywide. It uses private money, so I really like that part of it. And it lowers legacy homeowners' tax burden. We need to limit the abatements on private development, because we are shifting the tax burden on to homeowners. We should be using TADs for developments and abatements for developments that would not happen otherwise. That's something I learned pretty early on in city government. We just give them out like candy for developments that, would have happened otherwise. And that really does hurt our schools. And actually our former school superintendent spoke on that issue, Maria Karstarfin. And, we do also need to make sure that investors are not making lowball offers to our seniors. We need to go right up to the edge of the law, something to, not this within the Constitution, but we do need to make sure code enforcement is not used as a cudgel against seniors, and that these basically real estate vultures are not abusing our seniors. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think you've all done a wonderful job, and I'm going to give you a minute to think your thoughts together and give us a final thought or two. I have done some reporting on the displacement question, and several of the seniors that I've talked to are not only unaware, uninterested in staying in place because their children don't want to stay in parts of town that have been disinvested in. And it's hard. And I've regularly engaged people to come with me to talk to these folks. And it's a struggle. It's tough. Atlanta's got to figure it out. And I think you folks all have a pretty good grip on what it's taking to do that sort of work. Let's begin our final round of why you should be elected, why I should be voting for you. And let's start again at the bottom of the list alphabetically. Jason Winston.
Thank you again to the League of Women Voters. Sally, you've been so gracious tonight. I'm so honored to be in your presence. So thank you so much for hosting. You know, one of the things I think that we've seen over the last 20 years is somebody as in our council that has really been inside the community. You know, I've been to my fair share of meetings, and you know, obviously being part of council is about going to a lot of meetings and organizing meetings. But it's so much more than being council. It's about being in the community. And I've been in the community for the last 15 years. I've been in kitchen tables in Thomasville Heights. I've been to people's churches in Lakewood. You know, I've taken kids to school, and I've done a lot of these things for so many years where people have my phone number and know they can call me at 7 a.m. and I'll be there. And that's part of what it means to be a council person in our district. And so I'm ready to roll up my sleeves and continue the hard work and the community organizing and community service that I've given to this community for so long. And because I know that that's such a huge part of what it means to be a council person. I'm also ready for that policy side, the legislation, and making sure that we bring good ideas to our district and see those into fruition. So thank you again so much.
Thank you, Jason Winston. Victor D. Tate.
You're muted.
Dr. Tate, we need to unmute.
As a native of Atlanta, I'm excited about the opportunity to partner with every constituent in this district, right? To have an opportunity to bring everybody to the table, those who are already there, but extend an opportunity for those who are not there to be a part of reimagining this district and this city. I think it is important to have somebody that has been in the faith community, which is underrepresented as it pertains to some of the awesome opportunities that exist with housing, some of our churches, mosques, synagogues, or some of our larger landowners. And so the opportunity to partner with them to create housing, senior housing, and things of that sort. As a school board chair, I know what it is to have principals saying, listen, we want to be involved in the neighborhood and the churches, but we don't know how. And churches saying we want to partner with schools and don't know how. And so I believe that I bring a unique perspective of both the civic side and the faith-based side to City Hall. And I love to earn the support of these district members as we work together to ensure that in District 1, everybody counts.
Thank you, Dr. Victor Tate. Kelly Jean Lee.
So the other day I was telling a story about one of my kids and he works at the rock climbing gym that's, you know, right over here. And someone was like, I thought your daughter was 3. I was like, yeah, my daughter is 3, but I have thousands of kids because I'm a teacher. I've taught thousands, and at this point, definitely maybe pushing on to more than 1,000 students. And so everything that I do filters through the lenses of what would be best for each of my kids and their families. And being an educator gives me a perspective on the community that not that many people are privileged to have. And especially in this day and age of the pandemic, I've had a literal window into hundreds of students' actual homes and families because we were teaching them in their homes over Teams, which is very similar to Zoom. And so these perspectives are something that I will carry with me and form who I am as a leader for as long as I am in a leadership capacity. I come to teaching as a public service, and I'll bring that ethos of public service into my role as your next city council person for District 1. So thank you again for League of Women Voters and ACLU for hosting this evening. And I hope to earn your votes.
Thank you, Kelly Jean Lee. Russell Hobson.
First and foremost, thank you to the League of Women Voters and the ACLU. We are at a critical an inflection point in our city and in our country. Just as we have to fight on a state and local and national level about draconian voters laws, the attempt to legislate a woman's body. We also have to fight to make sure that our city is a place that is livable for people of all incomes, people of all ages, and is a place that is welcome for everybody who wants to make a home here, regardless of their circumstance, even if it's a homeless circumstance. This particular role is going to be about somebody who has experience, yes, but also is fearless in the champion and the defense of individuals who may not have the ability to do it for themselves. If you go to the intersection of passion and knowledge and experience, I'll be standing right there waving at you. And I want everyone to know that, because I hope to represent this district, everybody on this call, and the entire city in the new Atlanta, where we kind of reestablish what makes Atlanta great for real.
Thank you, Russell Hobson. Nathan Clubb?
Yeah, I'd also like to thank again the League of Women Voters, the ACLU of Georgia, and Sally, thanks for being a great moderator tonight. I think I'm uniquely qualified with my background as being a state auditor. My day job is to dig into the deep and complicated challenges that we face from a government level. Whether that's looking at the recruitment and retention, which ties in directly with our challenges with everything from policing to the Department of Public Works, digging into the finances, digging into ways in which we can propose and write better legislation. Those are all roles that City Council can play. I also have delivered for my community as a neighborhood association president, doing everything from working to build connected, protected bike trails to trying to create safer streets on Moreland Avenue, to recently we've moved along the landmark nomination process for the Ormwood Avenue Bridge, because we really need to protect the unique places that tie into the fabric of our district. And I want to be able to go out and beyond just the sand neighborhoods and take and carry that work to all of District 1, because I've seen challenges. I've been down to neighborhoods in the Southern District, part of the district, that have suffered from historic disinvestment, and I want to get in there and work to address those issues.
Thank you, Nathan Clubb. Clarence Blaylock.
Thank you for hosting. And my experience in city government makes me unique in this race. I've been to city council meetings. I've worked with city councils before. I understand how 911 dispatching works. I've sat in a lot of meetings, and the core of this job is constituent services. I do believe I will be able to continue that on, because I have experience dealing with the public, but I also have experience legislating from a position in city government. And I'd also like to thank Carla for her 20 years of service, and also her staff, and also Public Works, because that is a area of the city that's very neglected. I know they're given a hard time, but I think the COVID definitely hit them hard. And I think that's just they certainly had a hard time with it. And I just appreciate all city employees as a former one myself. And I realize they're the people that put in the work day in and day out. And I appreciate it. I was born in Atlanta. I love Atlanta. I choose it as my home, and I would be honored to be your next city council member. Thank you.
Thank you, Clarence Blaylock, and thank all of you. The light is fading on me here in my backyard in a beautiful Atlanta autumn evening. I just have all sorts of good things to say for the way you folks have delineated the issues, and you have very similar approaches to many of the things you fix, and I think the voters have some great choices ahead of you. I do think I need to thank Chinye Inura for her wonderful questioning, and I think Nicola Hines is going to give us a good farewell and wrap us up tonight, President of the League of Women Voters of Atlanta and Fulton County. Nicola?
Yes. Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and thank you again for attending our District 1 candidate forum for 2021 City of Atlanta Council. As Sally Sears mentioned, my name is Nicola Hines, and I'm the president of the League of Women Voters, Atlanta Fulton County. Thank you again, Ms. Sears. You have been one of our favorite moderators through this term. As I told a lot of the panelists, we've been doing this since June of last year of a virtual programming and candidate forums. So we are kind of pros at this. Thank you again to our candidates, Mr. Blaylock, sorry. I'm like, Mr. Blaylock, Mr. Clubb. I'm trying to do you guys in alphabetical order, but you're not on my screen alphabetically. Ms. Lee, Mr. Hobson, and Mr. Winston, and Mr. Tate. Sorry, I'm out of order. I'm just looking at you on my screen here. For taking the time out to educate, empower, and engage our residents of the city of Atlanta. Thank you to the League of Women Voters, Atlanta Fulton County, I just want to shout them out. We have 17 candidate forums scheduled within 30 days. So we are completely busy, and we're trying to make sure that the city residents of the city of Atlanta know what's going on with their local government. As a lot has mentioned, there's only 3 seats that are uncontested this year. So the face of government in the city of Atlanta can change overnight come November 2nd. I want to thank all of my board members who were able to attend tonight. And I just want to make sure that everyone who's listening, voting is important regardless if you vote every month, every year, or every 4 years. However, participating in local elections is even more important because it starts the change that is needed within your community. Your council members, your mayors, your sheriffs, your DAs, and judges should have sympathy and empathy for what you and your community need day to day. And the only way to make that happen is if you go to the polls as an educated voter and vote. So once again, I want to say thank you for attending tonight. I would not be the president if I don't solicit joining. So if you would like to join the League of Women Voters of Atlanta Fulton County, you can go to our website, lwvaf.org/join, because we're probably one of the few nonpartisan political organizations that accepts members from all sides of the aisles, race, gender, religion, and sex. And I just want to say after this, we have District 12 coming up. On Saturday, we have District 5. And then on Tuesday, we have our mayoral candidate race that will be within a partnership with Emory University, ACLU of Greater Georgia, Urban League of Greater Atlanta, and us. So please join us. There's limited seating for the mayoral candidate. It's only 250 seats in a large cathedral, which is Glen Memorial. So a lot of social distancing because they can hold 1,100 people, but we're only allowing 250. But it will also be hybrid, and it will be streamed virtual, I believe, YouTube on Emory channel. But once again, thank you, and hopefully we'll see you soon. And gentlemen, I always point out the gentlemen, we take all genders. So please make sure you join us. Okay. And Ms. Lee, I'm not leaving you out, but I have to always, guys see the word women and then they want to stop. So come join us. We're a great organization. Thank you again, everyone. Thank you again, Sally, for moderating. We so appreciate you. That concludes.